Welcome back to Beauty Marks Podcast. My name is Elizabeth Savillon, and welcome to another episode where we talk about all things healing, community, and how to embrace our story. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe to this podcast and leave a review. I know that Apple and Spotify do not make it easy, but if you need help on how to leave a review, you go to Beauty Marks Podcast, scroll all the way down where you see the stars, and there you can rate. Let me know what you're loving. Let me know what you would love to hear more about, and make sure to share it with your friends. Also, if you want to watch the podcast on YouTube, you can do so by going to Beauty Marks Podcast on YouTube, where you can watch the whole episode, see all my mannerisms and my facial expressions, and see the beautiful studio space, which is at Hi Hello Labs in downtown Orlando. And if you need any event, production, audio needs, they are your place to go. And if you are also an Orlando girly, make sure to check out She Cultivates Orlando, where we have women events every month to cultivate friendships. On today's episode, I wanted to talk about a little girl chat about the beauty of starting over. I know on social media, you probably hear about all the horrible things about toxic relationships, about what they do to you, how they affect you, how your life goes, and like all of that. But I feel like we don't hear a lot about what happens after you make the hardest decision of starting over. And how does your life look after you make that decision? A lot of the times, the fear of the unknown and the fear of starting over, the fear of not knowing how it will look like a year from now, 2 years from now, stops you from taking the risks, from making the decisions, because the short-term feelings of how you feel, sometimes that feeling of staying or going into what makes you feel good in the moment is a better feeling than what you feel when you make the right decision, and then you're like, wait, I don't feel good right now. And then it's been 3 months and I don't feel like I made the best decision. And so I wanted to talk about kind of post my journey of making the decisions of not going back to my corporate job, which was a toxic environment, and also getting out of my unhealthy, toxic relationship, and how my life has changed for the better. So even though the process and journey hasn't been perfect and there are still some hard days, I have learned so much through these years about myself and who I am today that I want to share with you. So the first one I wanted to share was sometimes when hard things happen in our life, as much as we don't want to believe it, like those are the things that are going to help us to make the hard choices to change. When life is good, when life is chill, when life is like the mundane stuff, like I just feel like we can get really comfortable. But when hard things happen, when pain, grief, loss, change happens in our life, that is when we are more willing to make the changes that are necessary. So I feel like the things that have happened post making the decision that was really hard to make and like stick to it was giving myself the opportunity to grow through a fresh start. Sometimes as scary as it is, because you're like, oh my God, I remember when that happened to me, I was 25. So I thought I was very old, and I thought that I wanted this life of what I thought it would look like. And so when that life was not going to happen for me, then it felt like, all right, I don't know what to expect. And now with perspective, I feel like that's what I have gained, like clarity of my situation. I feel like when that first happened and I became single, I pivoted out of corporate, I felt like it was such a loss. Like it was such a loss of my identity, of my life and everything. And now with perspective that I was able to gain new perspective, actually that was the best thing that could have happened to me, because that allowed me to have a fresh start, to learn from experience and learn from the things that I've gone through now. Now I'm able to see the relationships that I get into, and from my experience kind of learn like, all right, I made those mistakes. I was attracting these kind of relationships. I had a fault to play in what my dysfunction was, and to see the brokenness that I also had within my relationship. So when I'm dating now, that looks very differently. What I look for is very different than what I looked for at the time. And I'm not someone to preach about like, fresh start to get into a new relationship. But over the years, now it's been almost 3 years, I'm able to have that perspective to come into it like, wow, I have this knowledge and experience. Now I'm 28 and I can see things very differently from when it first happened. Another thing is that when something happens, and the beauty of starting over is that you can either reconnect with old relationships or you can make new friendships and relationships. I think that we sometimes, when we're in certain dynamics, we can cut off relationships. We cannot see the value of friendships or relationships. And I feel like what happened in the past 3 years, I started actually valuing my friends, the people that were actually there for me, my family, the people that walked through life with me. And I was able to reconnect and build a stronger relationship with them because of having to start over. Because at that point, I feel like I didn't have anyone. And so I had to, go back to them and be like, you know what? I made some bad decisions, but here I am and I am a new person, and it's taken years to cultivate that deeper relationship, but I'm so glad for it because I was putting my energy into relationships that weren't the best for me at the time. So another thing that I feel like starting over does for you is I feel like it helps you to not fear risk, to take the risk, because once you rip the Band-Aid off and you do the scary thing and meet fear when you're about to start something new, or when you're going into being single after X amount of years, or you're breaking up, or whatever the case is, you're going to get so scared. You're going to feel so scared and be like, oh my God, I have no idea how my life is going to be. But I also feel like once you take that risk of I made this decision, that helps you not only build confidence for yourself because you're seeing that you're capable of it. So that also helps you to have the willingness and develop the character to take risks. And I feel like when you're when you're living comfortable, or you're kind of in the same thing, then when something happens and then you have to kind of change your life or pivot your life, then you are going into the unknown. Sometimes you don't have a plan B. Sometimes you don't know what the next piece is going to be or look like. But I feel like within that, you learn so much about yourself. You learn so much about what you like, what you don't like. You learn so much about what you value, because you've lost something that you thought was everything. And then you realize actually, that's not the biggest thing in the world. I was talking to my friend the other day about that. In our early 20s, we really cared so much about getting the big girl job to make big girl money. And so that was our driving force of my early 20s. And the older I get, I'm I literally want a simple life. I want to have peace of mind, inner peace, good friends, good family, have health. Those are the things that I really care about. I'm working towards the things of financial, freedom, but my financial freedom number from back in the day was very different to what I want today. I just want to have more of a purpose-driven life. And I feel like that came out of putting my identity and my whole life into what I thought I valued and losing it. And then having to be actually, I don't value that. And actually, I don't need that to be happy. So I feel like those things are lessons and opportunities that were given to me that I believe that I was able to grasp the lessons by starting over. And if I wouldn't have started over and I would have stayed in where I was in the dysfunction, I would be a completely different person. And I am someone that believes that things happen for a reason, and that needed to happen for me to regain the clarity of what my life was going to look like and what my values look like realignment to my life. So maybe that doesn't have to happen to you. Maybe you don't have to go through grief or loss or all of that. But I was talking to someone on a previous podcast about the reality of life is that we will have pain and we will have hard things that we go through in life. As much as we can try to ooh, we're good, swing things, things happen, life happens, and there are hard moments, but you can still decide what you do with what happens. And you can have your moment of crying and grieving, because trust me, we go through that. But there's also those moments of being like, what am I going to do now with like this blank canvas that's in front of me? And like now I'm able to do the things that I wanted to do. A huge part of starting over for me has also been able to like rediscover and figure out like my inner child's goals and the things that I wanted. The hobbies that I wanted to do, like the acting classes, the dancing, like having just the excitement and the fearlessness to travel alone, to see that I'm capable of different things. And I feel like that was a gift that was given. Those were losses that I went through, and the pain, they were there. And I grieved and I cried and I went to therapy and I read the self-help books and I learned so much. But I also started, I feel like, living. Like I was more present because of the things that I've gone through and because I was able to start over again. And starting over, I know that as we get older is so scary, because you're like, I am X years old. How am I going to start over now? How am I going to start in a new relationship? How am I going to start a new job? How am I going to move to a different city? And why not? Why not do it? Like, you still have time. Like, we're not running out of time, but sometimes we feel that way because of the timelines, because of the pressure that we put on ourselves, because of the idea of the life that we thought we were going to have, which can shift and change. And I had to let go of that. The freedom that came with letting go of the timelines for me was huge. With letting go of the expectations or the pressures on myself, I feel like that helped me start living in the now and start being able to embrace where I'm at in life and the pivoting of, what I'm doing. I went back to my passions that I had as a young child of like being in journalism and wanting to do more of that. And so this is just to share like the good things that come out of making the hard decisions. That sometimes it doesn't feel like you're making the best decision because there's a lot of pain associated to it. But then when you look back, you're like, that was the best thing that could have happened to me. Because have you ever like thought of that in your life? Like there's so much change that happens and you're like, okay, when did that change start? Like, when did who I became today happen, And it's a lot of little moments, but it's usually because of something that happened that caused you to change. And I think that the beauty of that is that you're able to start focusing your energy on yourself, on the people that you care about, versus all the stuff that's maybe draining you from that. Another big part of it was the being okay with yourself and being okay with like your home, as we talked on this podcast, of like just being comfortable within with your own mind, with your own thoughts, with yourself, and then not fearing the unknowns anymore. Because you're like, honestly, a lot of the times I do sometimes like, I have moments that I'm like, okay, how is it all going to work out? And I've talked about it before, but I also feel like the beauty of starting over and making the decision is that now I'm like, all right, I got out of where I wasn't supposed to be. I got like back on track to like where I'm going. And now it's like, we're going in this direction. Like I'm more clear than ever in this direction. And so this episode is really just to encourage someone that maybe you just made a scary decision of like what I just shared about like a breakup or starting a new job that you're like, I have no idea. Like I feel like, how am I going to make it, in life? But I would just recommend to take it one day at a time. How do you envision yourself to be a year from now? There was an event I went to a few weeks ago that said that people that think more about their future self more, like a year from now, make better everyday decisions today because they have someone in mind that they want to be and know that the decisions that they make long term are going to help them versus like the automatic, like just living, going with the flow. There's a lot of pressure that, yes, we can put on ourselves as humans, but there's also those decisions that are pivotal to making and helping us get the change that we desire. out of ourselves, out of our life. Sometimes that is taking the risk to move across the country. Sometimes that is taking the risk of breaking up or whatever that looks like for you. So the beauty that comes out of starting over is so much more than staying the same. And I have had to remind myself of that so many times when I'm like, did I make the best decision? Yes, you did make the best decision, because even though you still have a lot of unknowns, it is now in alignment and you are so much more clear in like who you are as a person. And so that is something to be proud of. You took you took off the Band-Aid. Now it's walk in it, be in community, find your people, find your voice, find like what is your values and all of that, and then align that with where you're going. And even on the hard days, like they're not in the past. Your best is still yet in front of you. So just wanted to encourage someone today with that, as making hard decisions and starting over is, yes, can be a lot of hard things of what we see on social media of like coming out of these dysfunctional places, but so much more great things can be out there. And that all starts with our mindset of how we see that. Because if we believe that we're not worthy of having great things still, like if we believe that we're meant to be like in toxic relationships and this is all that we have and this is all that's out there, then of course, like you're going to continue being in that. But I just want to give you hope that there is so much better out there for you and that you made the right decision. So keep going and make sure to share this with a friend. Let me know what you thought about this episode, if it encouraged you, and I will see you guys next week.